What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of NFL Food for Thought right here on RotoGrinders.com. Absolutely insane week of football. I'm Justin Carlucci here, and I'm alongside of Keith Eyster, who's filling in for the Chief this week, who might be a little bit under the weather. So I hope you get well soon, buddy. But Keith, great to have you on board here, man. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Excited to be here. Hopefully Chief gets well soon. Thinking about him for sure. But yeah, exciting week of football coming off an awesome game last night. Your Titans pulling it out late. So that was a fun game to watch for sure.
Yeah, it was a late night for me, for sure. And we get to our story time segment at the end. I had the Titans as my final leg in a 12-game parlay that maybe you saw on Twitter, but there's a little twist to my story there. And I did tweet out about it, so I was transparent about it. But I had a wide mix of emotion when Josh Allen slipped and fell into Jeffrey Simmons, the best interior lineman on the Titans. I was ecstatic, but also confused as to the outcome. So we'll get to that at the end. But huge win for Tennessee, who lost to the Jets a couple of weeks ago. And if this is not more of a cliche week-to-week league, and we talked a little bit before the show here, Keith, we have 6 weeks of data from this year. There are still many assumptions to be made because there's so much context behind everything. Yeah, the Bills look like world beaters, and they are very good. They might be the Super Bowl favorites. They might be the AFC favorites. You know, 3 of their wins were against Houston, Miami, and the Washington football team, though. And they beat the Chiefs, who, wow, defensively, maybe they are bottom of the barrel in the league. And we'll get to the Chiefs a little bit later in the show as well. So there's so much context around such a short data sample size always. And when things are always changing in a week-to-week league, that's what makes this sport so addicting, right, Keith? Everything is just flipped on its head.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on Buffalo a little bit there. I think they are an elite team. What I don't think that we saw kind of through the first 5 weeks is that their defense is elite, and especially their rushing. Like, I think their pass defense is among the top in the league, no doubt about it. Obviously, you're facing Derrick Henry, and that's never an easy task. But their early season schedule was really, really soft. And I think their rushing defense may have more holes in it than it looked like it did through the first 5 weeks. Obviously, they were exploited by Henry last night. But I think that might be a little bit bigger of an issue than it originally looked like it might. So that was kind of a takeaway for me from that game last night.
Absolutely. That's definitely the first elephant in the room. Was fantastic game on Monday night. I'm satisfied with the outcome. Bills fans are not. I had a couple friends in Nashville. I do actually know a few Titans fans who live up here in the Northeast who are as demented as I am, I guess, being a Titans fan in Pennsylvania. And they said Broadway was just overrun with Bills fans. And, well, we'll see you later. Have a good flight home. But incredible game. And I do think the Bills are elite as well. This is such a league of one play. Every referee's decision matter. Every snap matters in this league. We saw it in the Dallas New England game, which we can talk about momentarily, that every snap matters. This isn't, in Major League Baseball in game 35, where there's 3 balls pitched in a row to batter XYZ. Like, that's kind of irrelevant for the most part, but the NFL is just absolutely insane. I think you're right about Buffalo. There's so much talk about how good this defensive line is, and they're able to keep fresh legs in there and cycle in 7 or 8 guys. Tremaine Edmonds is a beast. They just got Matt Milano back. There's some adaptation, when you don't see the field for a couple of weeks. And I do think the Titans are like sticking a square peg through a round hole because it's such a pass happy league. First of all, you're not accustomed to anybody running the ball, 25 to 30 times against you typically, which is Derrick Henry. And secondly, you're not used to Derrick Henry hitting you that many times when you have such a soft schedule in terms of rushing totals against you. The Bills really didn't see a lot of rushing attempts against them. As you said, a lot of them were game scripted out, total blowouts. So maybe they weren't tested as much. And there was a Titans offensive line who lost Taylor Lewan for most of the second half on top of everything. And you really did see Buffalo get worn down physically and mentally, surprisingly, in that fourth quarter. And I know it sounds stupid, and I know there's a lot of people who are straight analytics, and there's a lot of people who are straight eyeball people. I think maybe you can be a little bit of both when you evaluate something, because in the first half of that game, we know the Titans' bread and butter is play action, getting A.J. Brown and Julio open, and the linebackers weren't really buying it. Even after Henry's big run, it was tough sledding for Tannehill and company. Second half of that game, you start thinking a little bit slower. A.J. Brown's biggest catch of the fourth quarter, all three of their linebackers and their base defense bit on the play fake to Henry, and it was just pitch and catch. I mean, me and you probably could have completed that pass and would have met value on DraftKings Showdown last night. I mean, that's how easy it can be with A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill with the Hall of Famer Derrick Henry in the backfield.
Absolutely. I think the Titans passing game is interesting. And I mean, obviously going into this matchup with KC next week, they're going to be guys we're interested in. So Julio left with a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
Man, it's tough. I don't know. We'll see what his status shakes out to be, but hamstring injuries for wide receivers are tough. I was encouraged by what I saw from AJ Brown. He was obviously questionable all week coming into that game. But he looked pretty good. So I think we'll at least have A.J. Brown to play in what should be a massive total there with KC Tennessee because it gets pretty dicey for the Titans and their pass-catching talent after A.J. and Julio.
Yeah, and that worries me as a fan. We'll get to that game for sure in our Recipe for Success segment. Julio's availability, I mean, I jokingly said, could you imagine how good the Titans would be with Corey Davis? Availability is critical, and I love Julio as much as the next guy. And you're right, hamstring injuries are lingering often, and they're in a stretch of games where they have Kansas City and the Rams and the Colts, so not ideal. AJ Brown also said he lost 8 pounds over the weekend and had food poisoning, had 4 IVs. And he actually came out and said it. He ate Chipotle, and he said, "Sorry, Chipotle. I guess I'm not getting any endorsements from you guys."
Oh man!
So I guess that was his little flu game. But great game. I think the Bills are going to be fine. They have a pretty soft schedule. They're my betting favorite to win the AFC still. And see, I'm a pretty unbiased guy, which is why I do well typically, I guess. And I think we're going to be targeting the Bills very frequently in DFS as well. You mentioned the Julio injury. Thankfully, the Browns are on Thursday Night Football. We'll let the Showdown guys take care of that one. And thankfully, it's not our Showdown slate. We're on Sunday night. So we won't have to worry about that mess. But for you Showdown players and you season-long guys, Kareem Hunt, it looks like he's going to miss at least a month. And Nick Chubb, who knows? I mean, short week. I have Nick Chubb in a couple of home leagues, so that kind of stinks. But did you hear anything about the Browns injury stats? And of course, Baker Mayfield got popped last week too.
Yeah, man, tough. I mean, Cleveland relies so heavily on that running game, and now it looks like both of their studs are going to be out. So there was some rumblings that Chubb may make it back by Thursday night. I don't know. That seems kind of unlikely, but there's not much left. I think it'll be Dearness Johnson as kind of the early down back, and then Felton they'll mix in for the passing down role for sure. But yeah, I think Hunt out for sure, and Chubb is very questionable for Thursday night. So definitely a situation to monitor for Showdown.
Okay. Talking about injuries here in our Elephant in the Room segment, Antonio Gibson got hurt, underwent an MRI, I believe, or either that or he is today. McKissick came in and did McKissick things in a trailing game script, had 10 targets. That's what we were so used to seeing last year for the most part. And if Gibson doesn't play or is limited, they have Green Bay. McKissick's 5K on DK and PPR scoring. How interested are you in a scale of 1 to 10 if that's the scenario?
Yeah, I would be very interested in McKissick at 5K. I think they would be trailing in that game. I don't know that McKissick would have an every down role. I think who would it be? Jarrett Patterson probably that they would try to work in on some early down stuff. But definitely you'd see some sort of a role increase for McKissick, and he's obviously an elite pass catcher. If we get the right game script, him at 5K would be definitely in play. I played a fair amount of him last week because of that game script with Kansas City that we expected, and that worked out pretty nicely. So I think it would be something similar to that.
I like it. I like the call there. Another injury is Saquon. We don't know the deal there, and the Giants are taking on Carolina. And Devontae Booker is still pretty cheap. Carolina's run D on paper. They have some household names, pretty strong. Is this a context thing where maybe it's like a strength of schedule thing? I don't know. I mean, Dalvin Cook was all right. I know the game went to overtime last week, but if Saquon's out, do you have any interest in Devontae Booker at 5,500? I mean, you think on paper it's a rough matchup, but I'm not too scared of Carolina. Sam Darnold, I mean, we blamed Adam Gase, and then every week I was looking at PFF grades. His quarterback grade has been declining every week. I'm sure that doesn't help Chief out, with whatever illness he's dealing with, as he's a Panthers fan. Oh, man, sorry, buddy. That was a rough one, a gut-wrenching OT loss to Minnesota. But it's possible that's a crap game, Panthers and the Giants, if Saquon's out, and God. But Darnold is having trouble sustaining drives. I mean, it could be one of those shorter field things for the Giants. Maybe Booker dumps one in and he's fine, but I don't know what Booker's upside is, even though if he's going to play a lot. So tough for me to justify playing him even at that cheap price tag. Got any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm have a hard time with Booker. He's just not that great of a back. I have a lot of respect for Carolina's defense. I mean, they're a young and up and coming defense, but I think there's a lot of talent there. They've certainly showed it through the first 6 weeks here. So yeah, I just like you said, not a great game environment overall. I think there are much better spots to look to.
Yeah, that's a tough game environment. Even if we get some news on Kadarius Toney, who left the game last Sunday. I mean, I guess you could see what happens throughout the week with that receiver group. Galladay, Toney, and Slayton all have questionable tags. In some weird world, if they're all out, I mean, then we could talk about Shepard on pure volume. But other than that, if, two of the three play, like, it's tough in that probably low volume kind of garbage game environment.
I do have more interest in the Giants passing game. Let's see. Gilmore should be eligible to come off reserve, I think, for the Panthers, right?
Yep.
So that might make what's been a pretty good pass defense already even better. So definitely a situation to monitor there if they get Gilmore back for this week. But I was just I'll be keeping an eye on this Giants wide receiver situation. They're all really nicely priced. I think Shepard's in play regardless, even if Galladay and Toney suit up. But yeah, definitely interested in the Giants receivers.
Latavius Murray has a Q tag. He left the game last week. They're taking on Cincinnati. One of my good friends was all over Latavius Murray, which is fun. He's a large field player, and he came in at 2%. And he was way overweight. He scored the first touchdown. And I didn't know when he left, but I saw then Le'Veon Bell came in and scored. And then I think Devontae Freeman also scored. And I'm like, man, you would have been onto a monster 2% call. So this backfield has been a mess since the unfortunate domino effect of J.K. Dobbins and then Gus Edwards. Just unreal stuff. Imagine the firepower they would be having with either one of those guys healthy as well. Taking nothing away from Latavius Murray or Bell or Freeman, but there's a reason why the Ravens were able to pick up Le'Veon and Devontae Freeman onto their practice squad is because they've just lost a step or two. So, you know what? I'm looking at Le'Veon Bell. Even if Murray's out, Le'Veon Bell's 4,500 and Devontae's 4,400. I still don't know what the upside is. I mean, sure, you want to play a couple large field darts, okay, but you still have Williams lingering around, and I guess they just don't trust him as he kind of got phased out a little bit after he was just chalk a few weeks ago, playing a ton of the snaps. So, is this one of those, if Murray's out, is this one of those murky situations where maybe Williams becomes the lead back again out of the blue? Who knows? He's the best runner at this point out of the rest of the group, in my opinion, in terms of talent.
Yeah, I agree with you there, man. As somebody who owned a lot of Lamar in tournaments last week, those three rushing touchdowns from other people not named Lamar was very frustrating. So He didn't play that badly, but his score obviously struggled because of the lack of touchdowns. Yeah, who knows what the Ravens are doing with all these 30-year-old running backs. Tyson Williams looked great. I think he's definitely the most explosive runner there. They don't trust him in pass protection, I guess, or that obviously there's reasons in-house there where they're not utilizing him, despite him being probably the most talented guy. I think you have to have some interest at these price tags if Murray does end up missing. It's not a comfortable situation because it looked like a three-headed split last week. But I mean, 4,500 and 4,400 on Bell and Freeman would be pretty interesting with as much as Baltimore likes to run the ball. Probably not safe enough for cash just with the uncertainty surrounding the situation, but I would have some interest in tournaments.
Yeah, so Murray played 38% of the snaps before he left, and then it was pretty much an even split. Le'Veon outsnapped Devontae 22-21, so that's just a garbage situation there as well. And I totally get my buddy who played Latavius Murray and asked me about it before lock, getting a little bit of leverage there, so that was just a tough break for him, and maybe those would have been his additional 2 scores. But Lamar was projected around 20%. Did he come in around that in some of the GPPs you were in, or was that something like that?
He definitely got up above that 15% mark, which is, we don't see quarterbacks get that high very often. So, people were all over it.
You know, the thing about, I know this is kind of a look ahead, but Lamar traditionally slaughters the Bengals too. I'm trying to pull up his stat muse as we look here, but before we get to a look ahead, give me another one of your big takeaways. I think we covered most of the injuries that we know about right now anyway. So I don't know if you're seeing any I missed. If not, what else was a big elephant in the room for you after Sunday's action?
One situation to monitor, the Bears running backs, we should get Damian Williams back. I think they're playing the Bucs, so we're probably not interested in that situation anyway, but probably not going to have Khalil Herbert to think about this week with Williams back. I probably see that as a split. So probably no interest in the Bears backfield, especially against a tough matchup in Tampa Bay. A huge takeaway for me. It's not really new, but I'm going to continue to hammer it home. Cooper Kupp is absolutely elite alpha wide receiver. Dude has received double-digit targets in every single game this year. Even the game that Robert Woods went off, Kupp was still out there, got 10 targets that game, and he's been above 10 every single game this season. So his price tag is up to 8,400 on DraftKings. It feels like we shouldn't have to pay that much for Cooper Kupp, but if you look at the numbers and everything this guy is doing, he is in the usage realm of Devontae Adams. It's absolutely elite among the entire league. So I'm just going to continue to jam in Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, and you know what? You can perceive Kupp as the move the chains guy, slot receiver, which is fine, but he's still top 20 in the league in air yard market share as well. So he's benefiting. Touchdowns. Exactly. He's benefiting from Matt Stafford, and we're starting to see the skill gap. At first, there was speculation as of was it more of a McVay scheme thing, or how wide is the skill gap between Stafford and Goff? I know there was some speculation around that, but it is clear that Stafford is much better than Jared Goff. So I hope the people that were throwing that crap out on Twitter can put that to rest. So Cooper Kupp, big benefit from Matt Stafford's arrival, and Matt Stafford, big reaping the benefits of McVay's system and having a ton of talent. So they're fun to watch. And you're right, Cooper Kupp's been unbelievable, and it's just so funny what a little better quarterback play can do to some of these skill guys. So I know Robert Woods owners are a little irritated, but it's a long season. We're only a third of the way through, and while I do think Kupp will continue to produce and probably end up as I know you had a hot take and thought he might be. What was it top 5? Or did you read the one that said top? Oh no, it was TJ that said he'd be the number 1 overall fantasy receiver. Are you going that hot by the end of the year?
I think you have to consider it. The production, I know he's running a little bit hot on touchdowns probably, but the target market share, he's up there among the top in the league. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't continue unless they're just Woods gets unhappy and they try to force feed him or something. But I mean, everything we've seen from usage early in the season, like Kupp has to be in that conversation with like Adams and Tyreek and DJ Moore. Like, I think those are probably like your top 4-ish that are in contention for it. But yeah, Kupp is in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, huge year for Cooper Kupp.
I just know they have Detroit this week too, so you've got the Stafford Goff showdown. But Darrell Henderson is absolutely going to be somebody we're going to be looking at also against that really bad Detroit defense.
A little bit of revenge game too for Stafford, and
for sure.
Like, I know we're early in the week, we don't have ownership projections yet. Do you think Kupp's price will negate ownership against Detroit, or is he still going to be like an elite cash option as of now? I mean, of course, we don't know if there's going to be any free squares opening up come Friday or Saturday, but like, is there going to be sticker shock among the industry?
I think there will be. And you look at the two guys ahead of him, Devontae, 8,900 versus Washington. I think there's going to be a lot of interest there. And the one that there's going to be a ton of interest in, assuming health checks out, we'll have to see the practice reports and things like that. But Tyreek Hill against Tennessee is just a smash spot. So people are going to want to pay up for those two guys for sure. Sticker shock on Cooper Kupp. I could see him coming in a little bit under the radar this week, but we'll have to see how it shakes out.
So another big elephant for me is, I know we want to talk about this game, is the Cowboys are just an elite offense. They played about as sloppy as a football game as you could play. And I'm the last one to ever like criticize officiating, but boy, has it been brutal between MLB and NFL and college football. Like, officiating across the board has been poor, very poor. And I know you can make the argument, I feel like a non-millennial argument would be, well, it's the age of social media and you're just exposed to more bad calls because everything's online. But I don't think so. I mean, you even heard on Monday Night Football, whoever the guy from New York was, I forget, the head official was like even irritated that they were taking so long to make calls on the field in the Buffalo Tennessee game. It was kind of funny. But there was some brutal officiating in that Dallas New England game, in my opinion. Regardless, crazy ending to that game. You and I were on the Sunday Night Showdown show as the YouTube chat was keeping us posted. And I wish that turned out a little bit differently for you. Zeke still had a ton of opportunity, which probably kills you deep inside. 17 carries and 9 targets. I mean, God, the thing is, and I think last week, I talked about it with Chief. I think it was Chief, but so Prescott threw the ball 51 times, but now with the emergence of Dalton Schultz, and Jarwin still there and healthy, who's a productive tight end, like, it's hard to get that 15 target game out of Lamb or Cooper anymore. And yeah, the game went to overtime and Lamb, still saw 11, which is great. But Prescott is very well squarely in the MVP conversation, honestly. And he's a guy whose injury we're going to have to monitor too. He was in that little boot. They're on a bye week, I know, but he's really spreading the ball around too. So you can mix and match so many different stacks there, where the Cowboys are suddenly a team where, you can have a good amount of exposure, but not have the right stack to make it work there. So is this more of a case of Dallas's offense is elite, or maybe New England's defense isn't as good as we initially thought it was throughout the year? Or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do lean more I think the New England defense is good and well above average. Elite might be a stretch, but I think this Dallas offense is definitely elite. I mean, they're just a very well balanced, like both of the backs. I mean, Zeke looks great. Looked like he was kind of falling off last year, but he's back in there. And the uptick in targets was a nice surprise for me as somebody who had him at the top of a tournament last week. And Pollard looks just explosive, kind of spelling Zeke out of the backfield. So just a combination of two great backs. The receivers were elite, are elite, will remain elite, with Cooper and Lamb there. And then Schultz has really taken a nice step. So yeah, I mean, this Dallas offense, I think Dallas overall as a team is a lot better than we thought they were. Even their defense with what Trayvon Diggs is doing on the other side. Yeah. But that's also changing the way that they need to play on offense. And we need to consider that for fantasy. Like they no longer need to just run plays at an insane clip and just try to outgun everybody on offense because their defense can actually hold their own. So I think it's costing us a little bit on fantasy. So it is a lot tougher to find the stacks for fantasy, where last year you could throw Dak in there with his two receivers and have a pretty good shot at an explosion, especially, I mean, obviously before Dak got hurt, but I don't think we have that anymore with the way the running game has looked and the way the defense has performed. It's going to be a little bit tougher to find that elite Dallas passing stack.
I'm with you on that. I agree. You have any other big takeaways? I have a couple more in the clip here in case you want to hear what I have to say.
I don't have anything right off the top. Go ahead.
Okay, well, spin this off of me. A couple things here is we're going to revert to Thursday Night Football and Nick Sirianni. And trust me, Nick Sirianni, I'm in the heart of, Philly sports talk media. I'm about an hour and 30 north of Philly. He has taken on more than he could chew. Like we've seen novice, I don't want to say novice, younger first or second year head coaches either initially take play calling or inherited them somehow by chance. And I think it's just too much. So is there going to be any narrative-ness around getting the damn ball to Miles Sanders? Because this is sort of a look ahead, but he's 5,100 against the Raiders, who don't scare me whatsoever. Much improved defense. I get it. Max Crosby and company. But if Sirianni's actually going to like have a bit of a brain here, I mean, he's feeling so much pressure from everybody in the outside world too, to give his best player, arguably, the damn ball on offense, that, it's really not rocket science here. So Miles Sanders, the price tag is justified so far based on the volume and opportunity he has received. But these are one of the things where this could change. Like if it's going to change at all, the philosophy here with Philly and Nick Sirianni, and he wants to get the media off his back and maybe actually win a ball game here, which they really need to get a W in a very winnable game against the Raiders. Like, it's time to give Miles Sanders the football. He is way too freaking cheap. 5,100 on DK. That's like second string running back price we talk about throwing in there. Like Devontae Booker's 400 more than him. So like, is there a chance this week that it's Miles Sanders with the opportunity?
Yeah, he was not somebody that stuck out in my initial glance, but it's because he's been so far off the radar this year. But I think that's a great call. Hurts has looked a little bit shaky in the passing game. I know he's performed for fantasy. He's been a great fantasy quarterback. But if we're talking real life football for a minute, he hasn't quite been getting it done in the passing game. Obviously, he's an elite rusher, and that's part of what's cutting into Sanders' role. But I agree with you. I think they would be well served to go a little bit more run heavy, especially in this matchup with Las Vegas. The Las Vegas pass rush has actually been really good this year. And I think they can negate that a little bit by handing the ball to Sanders a little bit more. And we've seen him. He's a very talented guy from everything that we saw out of him last year. So, I think that's a great call. Okay.
I have one more open-ended question to you. Make it two. I have two open-ended questions to you, and then we'll move on to our recipe for success and more of a look ahead of this coming week and kind of what we're looking at. My first one to you is, what do you make out of Justin Herbert and the Chargers, the darlings of the NFL, other than the Bills, coming into, week 6, 6 points with those weapons? Statement game from Baltimore after almost, dropping one to the Colts previously. I made a joke. I'm like, and that was the last time Justin Herbert's name was in the MVP conversation. Like that might have been it for him. He could have a fantastic year, but that might have those tickets might be ripped up. Those futures bets we have in on Herbert winning the MVP or whatever. What do you make of that game? Is it an anomaly, or was that, was there some tangible stuff we could take away from that?
I don't know what to think of it. I do know that, I mentioned having quite a bit of Lamar, but I had even more Herbert attacking that game in tournaments last week. Like, Herbert was just looking so awesome coming into that game. Baltimore dealing with a ton of injuries, as we know, even on the defensive side. So I didn't think Baltimore's defense would be able to stop them. Thought we'd get a great game environment, but the Chargers just didn't show up, and I don't know what to do with it at this point. I'm going to probably end up writing it off as just a blip, and they didn't game plan correctly or weren't able to get anything going, got behind and panicked a little bit, and then it turned really ugly. And you just kind of throw games like that out and go back to what you know and what has made you successful up to this point. So, yeah, I mean, I still have plenty of interest in this Chargers offense. Keenan Allen is another guy that I had a ton of exposure to. Like, I think Mike Williams was more injured than probably shouldn't have been out there. I think that was a big problem for Herbert and the offense as a whole. That's kind of how they have taken a step forward is Mike Williams looks like a true alpha wide receiver, and it's impacted Keenan's production, but just a big physical guy and somebody they were utilizing much more than they had in the past. So he gets a little bit healthier. I think the Chargers can go back to being elite. I mean, with Eckler, Williams, and Keenan, like this should be an absolutely elite offense. I'm not too concerned about 1 week where they just looked absolutely awful. I'll probably be going right back to them.
Yeah. Some guys are just late bloomers. Mike Williams looks great.
Stud.
Stud. And if there's a team that should be comfortable trailing, in a sense, is the Chargers, because they just pass so much. But you know what? It's funny because we always say, well, we'll throw one game out and then it's just a week. You know, look at the Titans, lost to the Jets. We don't know, beat the world beating Buffalo Bills at home. Like, it's such a week to week league that it could have just been hey, like Baltimore had their number that week, whatever adjustments they made. And you're right, they're dinged up, which is a little worrisome. But the Chargers aren't on main slate. Actually, I think they're on a bye. As are the Cowboys. So a lot of household names are off this week. So there's less higher end options at quarterback, including no Justin Herbert, which I think is interesting too, because that could have been a nice bounce back. What have you done for lately recency bias type of maybe low owned spot if we were lucky. Unfortunately, they're not on the main slate. One more thing here, and it is like, I think if there was any doubt that they weren't, is I think the Cardinals are the best team in the NFC. I know Cleveland got beat up in the second half of that game, but right from the rip in that one, I mean, that was one of the teams in my parlay. I took the Cardinals and the points. I thought, they were getting 3.5. I think when I took them, I thought, it was a fairly even game. And I thought the Cardinals were just a better team based on pure talent. And Cleveland, without Jarvis Landry, Kareem Hunt went down, no Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield. I mean, it just got worse for the Cleveland Browns, who are in a bit of trouble now. And now it's going to be Baker Mayfield has to go out there and win you some games. So I think we're going to get a real sense of what Baker Mayfield's really made out of moving forward here. And he's dealing with it dislocated his shoulder. So what is he even capable of doing? But super impressed, as if I wasn't already, with Kyler Murray and company there. Just a no-brainer, like wipe the floor with the Browns performance. The Cardinals are the real deal. So, but another offense, Keith, where you expect DeAndre Hopkins to have 1,600 yards, but Kyler's doing the Dak. He's spreading the ball out. Christian Kirk, AJ Green 1 week, Rondell Moore the first couple of weeks. Chase Edmonds, James Conner, good luck. I mean, it just seems like neither of them consistently produce because Murray is getting it done with his feet again. And the first part of 2020, I think he historically was the highest scoring quarterback in fantasy for a period of time. And then obviously he dealt with that lower body injury and just wasn't the same in the second half. So are the Cardinals the best team in the NFC, or are they the best team in football right now? Or is it still the Bills? What's your call here?
Yeah, this is the spot I had identified once you were you had said you wanted to get a couple off. You were firing off Philly, and I was looking through, and I was like, we got to talk about Arizona. Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, very concerned about his usage as an alpha wide receiver. As far as overall team, I think it's working. They're a better team because they're not just kind of forcing it into Hopkins, like the things Rondell Moore is doing. Even AJ Green looks good. The two-headed running back situation there. But yeah, just a great all-around, well-rounded team. It's working for them. I think the Rams, I know they erased the Rams, but I like that. I think that's a toss up between them two at the top of the NFC. But from a fantasy standpoint, it's very difficult to find. Kyler Murray is super expensive, first of all, and then they're spreading it around to 3 wide receivers. Now Zach Ertz is going to be involved in this offense.
Yep.
Like Max Williams had a decent role before he got injured, so I imagine that Ertz steps right into that. Maybe that ends up being the answer as we go Kyler to Ertz. Ertz's price tag is $3,900.
Chalk City.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that spot. We'll see. I mean, is there any reason that he doesn't step right in here? I mean, veteran guy, excellent run blocker, so he's going to be out there. Definitely tons of interest. That actually is going to raise Murray's ownership from where I thought it was. Obviously, we talked about the KC Tennessee game. I think Mahomes is going to be super popular. So I was thinking Murray would be completely like unowned in this spot because it's tough to stack him. Now that you have Ertz with it, maybe he gets more ownership than I was originally thinking that he might. But yeah, very interested in this Arizona offense as a whole. Definitely elite, and going to be looking to exploit that going forward in fantasy for sure.
It's almost like the Cowboys in a sense where, okay, you want to play the Cardinals, good luck getting the nut stack, figuring out who exactly to pair with Kyler. Hopkins has 34% of the team's air yard market share. Kirk has 25 and AJ Green has 25. But Hopkins kind of has the Tyreek Hill treatment a little bit here. It might be skewed a little bit. In week 5, Hopkins had 75% of the air yard market share. His other weeks, week 1, 34, 15, 13, 46, big number, 75 in week 5, big number, and then only 19 last week, but he scored twice. You know, it's so funny how touchdown equity could change your perspective on someone. I mean, if he doesn't score twice, it's like, where was DeAndre Hopkins again, right? So, and you look at Christian Kirk's numbers, right? Kirk has a 25% air yard market share, 22% week 1, 35% week 2, 42% week 3. Right when you're jumping on board there with Christian Kirk as the number 2, 2% of air yard market share week 4 and 6% in week 5. And then he comes right back up to 45% of the air yard market share in week 6. So it is tough to identify where the ball's going, and Zach Ertz adds a new wrinkle into figuring out where the hell the ball's going to go. I think we both agree Ertz is going to be the no-brain chalk tight end play in cash game builds this week. We could see 60% ownership at that price tag probably at tight end, a position where nobody likes to pay for anybody anyway, outside of Travis Kelce. So I'm interested to see where Kelce will project against Tennessee and Zach Ertz there. So is this going to be one of the Millie darts where James Conner is the puke leverage and dumps it in 3 times in like a 45-0 game against Houston? Is it going to be one of those, man?
Man, I really hope not, because tons of interest in this Arizona offense. But Connor, that's like, I've played a lot of Chase Edmonds this year, and he's looked really good, but just not having a goal line role is quite frustrating. Just giving it off to the plotter, James Conner.
Connor the Plotter. I think we just got a new nickname for him.
Just
on
real
this.
Quick on Hopkins, I might have more interest, but the price tag is still elevated. It elevated more to his role last year than where he has been up to this point this year. Like you said, if he doesn't score those 2 touchdowns, I think we see a price drop on Hopkins here, and then I would have had a ton of interest. But at 7,700, I mean, that's up around. He's getting close enough to like the Cup's Tyreek Adams tier, where he just doesn't have that same north of 30% target market share. So
right.
He's really tough to play at that price tag.
He is tough to play, but like he had that 1 week of 70+ air yard market share, 1 week of 40+. So it's almost a great large field GPP kind of look, right? But I don't want to say Hopkins is boom or bust at this point, which sounds ridiculous. But at that price tag, you're either going to be in a great spot, or just, you're tilting late slate already if he doesn't get that air yard market share. I mean, they got weapons. They have underrated weapons, and we didn't even talk about Rondell Moore, I wasted some fat budget on him earlier in the season, and he's still on the field, just like not as gadgety. They have weapons. AJ Green, fountain of youth, like they have underrated. It's funny to say the Cardinals, who are undefeated, have some underrated weapons, but they truly do.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean that's what I was talking. It's just hard to find. Like you have to guess. It's almost like if you want to stack the Cardinals, you have to build 3 or 4 teams with them just to be able to know you're going to get it right. Because it's a tough combination to figure it out. I do like that Ertz is there now, and especially this week, he seems way underpriced. That's probably what I'll just end up doing is Murray to Ertz, and maybe I'll sprinkle in an AJ Green or Christian Kirk. But yeah, tough situation. But love the Murray to Ertz now.
I feel like every week I say this, so this is like I just should have a voice recording of it. But Brandon Cooks is still your air yard market share leader in the NFL. Nico Collins came back, saw a handful of targets, looked good. Cook still had 57% of the air yards market share. And like, if I'm going to put any money on any take, it's going to be that Houston's going to be trailing for 3.5 quarters. Cooks hasn't scored since week 2. He saw 13 targets again last week. 17 DK points, had a couple of duds. But Cooks, I mean, like on this slate, if you're looking to kind of like, mitigate or cross off some of that ownership, if the Cardinals come in fairly, higher than you want, then like, I don't mind looking at Cooks because the trailing game script, the air yards, like eventually he's going to score again. It's just going to happen. He's 6K on DK. He's probably right at that price where you're like, I'm not paying for Brandon Cooks in Houston, but if it's part of a game stack, I don't mind that. And my last thing with my look back here, and then we'll get into the week ahead, is Jamar Chase is just still too cheap. Like, I don't care what the matchup is. We just mentioned all the injuries Baltimore has in the secondary. Maybe that Chargers game was an anomaly. Chase is second in the league in air yard market share, 46%. He's phenomenal. PFF rates him out. Best receiver against man coverage. Baltimore plays a lot of man, blitzes a ton. This is a great spot for Jamar. 6,700? Is he not even 7K?
6,200. All of these Bengals wide receivers are completely underpriced. Like T. Higgins coming off a chalk last week at 5,300 gets a price drop because he didn't do anything. And then Tyler Boyd is down there at 4,700 as well. So yeah, all 3 of these Bengals wide receivers are very, very underpriced.
Yeah, I totally agree. And by the way, quick plug here, NBA is starting on Tuesday night and our team is ready to rock and roll. So we have a ton of content popping off. As soon as we get done here, I'm going to knock out some PGA content. We're firing all cylinders, Keith. This is one of the greatest times of the year right here in October.
Super busy, right? Still got the MLB playoffs wrapping up. It seems like people just always forget about the MLB playoffs until the World Series, but it's really some great baseball being played also. But yeah, super excited to get into the NBA. We'll be doing some content for that. I think we're on some Sunday crunch times before our football show. So yeah, be fun to get into the NBA swing for sure.
I was waiting for that MLB reference. I'm just a salty Yankees fan, but I've been watching, and it's been an incredible postseason too. It really has. So every time I see Jared Carabas tweet from Barstool, I just close my app and I'm like, all right, like I've just seen enough of Boston. But incredible run for Boston specifically, and a lot of people didn't have them where they were. If you have any futures tickets, like gonna be a fun sweat for the Red Sox, that's for sure. Okay, let's get into our recipe for success segment, and we touched on a couple of things, but one of the chalkier games or games you would quote unquote need some exposure to is the Kansas City Tennessee game. Titans on a short week get a desperate Pat Mahomes and desperate Andy Reid, and I'm crapping my pants over here. Titans coming off that super high win against Buffalo, and they get the Chiefs on a short week, so not feeling too good about that. 4.5 line, 56.5 total, and we said that might creep up to 60, and we haven't seen a 60 burger in a while. Talk to me about this game, and of course there's going to be interest in this game. I mean, fade at your own risk. There's going to be some cash game plays, but like some crossover there. Like you might need some of these plays and maybe get different elsewhere depending on what kind of format you're playing this week.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the ownership here. But man, it is a juicy matchup. I don't think either one of these defenses is good, but I think both offenses are elite. Just what an awesome game environment this should be. And then, I mean, from the Tennessee side, if you have Julio out, I mean, AJ Brown becomes a great play. Obviously, we just saw what Henry is capable of. We've seen it all year, like just on pace for a record amount of touches, rushing attempts this year. And we didn't talk about the McNichols injury, but that is something that we need to monitor, because if Henry gets that passing down role as well, that just makes him like that raises, he already has an enormous ceiling just because of his touchdown equity. You add some pass catching into that, we're talking about just like the best fantasy player ever, right? So we'll have to see how that McNichols injury shakes out. But yeah, this game environment is going to be the best of the week. 10 games again this week with buys and things like that. But this will definitely be your first look spot for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think if I read correctly, my dog just got back from the groomer and she is amped up, and boy, is she a pretty girl. And then they give her those bandanas when they're done. So hopefully she doesn't knock my mic out here, but just had to throw that out there. She has her Titans bandana on today, by the way. Victory Tuesday.
Represent.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, this game, and McNichols, if I'm reading this correctly, he wasn't inactive, and I know he was dealing with an injury, so he suited up. And I played a couple of showdown darts. That was it. And I was like debating on tossing him in. I'm really glad I didn't. But so he was, I think, active, but didn't play. So we'll have to see there. And if you play a game script where Tennessee doesn't get going early, and that's the biggest worry. Like Henry wears defenses down. The Chiefs defense is so bad though, which kind of makes me feel a little bit better. And again, I guess that's just more of an assumption since we're only 6 weeks in, but they look pretty brutal. That I would just worry about the Chiefs getting out to way too early of a lead. Last year, Arthur Smith, when he was the OC, was stubborn and would run Henry in negative game scripts until they kind of crept around. But McNichols is like a legit playmaker for this team, and they'll play him. They'll put him out there. So, God, can you play Jeremy McNichols on a main slate? Like, if he's ready to go? I mean, if you're playing a Millie dart, I guess maybe, but if he didn't play at all. So let's just say McNichols is limited, and Henry has grown as a pass catcher, like you said. AJ Brown, God, if he practices full all week, 6,300. I mean, we're probably looking at another cash game type of play there at a total price thing, right? And that is scary because he's been injured, hasn't really played a full complement of snaps like at all this season. But without Julio Jones and this gauntlet of a schedule, like they're going to need him to suit up and play close to 90% of the snaps there. So the problem is it gets so murky after AJ Brown. Like there's no Jonnu Smith anymore. Maybe you play Ferkser in some larger field GPP stuff. I'm having such a tough time. Westbrook Akina played a lot, was a really good blocker last night. No upside, doesn't scratch the itch there for me. Chester Rogers, I don't know. He's been relevant on and off. I thought Marcus Johnson was going to be the guy. He missed the first couple of games of the season, had a fantastic camp. 2 weeks ago now, he had 6 cashes against the Jags or something like that. It was a fairly productive game. So I don't know. After Julio Jones in this pecking order, you're gonna have all these guys who you don't know who to play. They all kind of stink talent wise, coming from a Titans fan, but they're all going to be sub 5%, 2% owned. And geez, I mean, if they go for 5 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, I think Ferkser probably garners the most ownership as a way to maybe get different and get a little piece of this game. Again, that doesn't really do it for me. But eventually Ferkser is going to score. Like he's another guy who they have to get going.
Yeah, like Ferkser just hasn't had the role up to this point. Like he's splitting with like Michael Pruitt and Jeff Swaim. Like he's just not like, I know you get Jonnu out of there. You think Ferkser is going to step right into like a massive role. And he has not been out there for full snaps. So I don't think I end up getting to Ferkser. I mean, I think it's just AJ Brown and Henry for me on the Titans side of this. Give me as much of that as I can fit. The one guy I think I might try to mess around with if you're looking for a super cheap punt like Millie play, Westbrook Akina got a little bit of run at the end of that Bills game. He saw like 3 targets in the fourth quarter. So I don't know what that was, like why he didn't have much of a role in the game up until that point. But just watching that game, all of a sudden he popped up, like they targeted him like 3 times in a row, it felt like. So I don't know. We've tried that before and it hasn't worked out, but he'd be the one guy I might try to go back to.
The thing about Vrabel and his style is like, and his staff, they're just football guys. So if they're like Westbrook Akina, you're blocking better in the first two, like you played well, you're sticking, like there's no, it doesn't seem like he's very analytical. I don't, he just, or maybe he puts off that football guy persona. I mean, he's actually made some decent aggressive coaching decisions, but in terms of the personnel behind after Julio, like I don't know. Josh Reynolds was a scratch too as well, and a lot of people pegged him as like the sleeper in that offense. And before that Julio Jones signing, it was supposed to be Reynolds. It's tough to peg there. I am worried about ownership in this game as well. But talk to me about the Chiefs side. I know we can't spend forever about this, although this game could probably be an entire show if you want to get
it certainly could. Like, there's just so much goodness here. Like the Titans defense, I don't know. You're a Titans fan, you can tell me, but they have looked awful. And now their number one corner is out, adding to already several injuries on the defense. Like their defense is in shambles. Kansas City should just be able to exploit it. And I mean, we're just going to see a ton of points in this game. I don't think there's any way around it. So despite ownership, I think you're going to want some exposure in some way. Maybe you try to get creative with an off the wall play. It's Chiefs wide receivers that I would look to try to get weird with this. I mean, we've seen Hardman have a fairly decent role. DeMarcus Robinson caught a touchdown last week, I believe. Josh Gordon is there lingering. We don't know when he tries to like take over some of those snaps. Presumably they brought him in for a reason and they want to work him in. Is this the week that it happens? I don't know. Pringle is still there, but I think these secondary Chiefs wide receivers are going to be a good way to differentiate in this game. But I don't know if you have a strong lean on who it might be. Worst case scenario would be like, oh yeah, this is the week that we're going to get Josh Gordon involved. Andy Reid says that out loud, and Josh Gordon just ends up as massive chalk. But I don't foresee that happening. So it's going to be kind of a guessing game with these Chiefs secondary wide receivers.
I feel for this Titans defense because I was really excited on paper coming into it. Bud Dupree missed a couple of weeks because he rushed back from injury. Amani Hooker didn't play like at all, the starting safety. You finally get them back, and Christian Fulton having a phenomenal year goes on IR. You lose Caleb Farley, first-round draft pick towards ACL. You feel for that kid who was thrown in the fire last night and kind of, waiting to see what his upside is. Chris Jackson got hurt, another guy on the outside. So the fact that I'm rattling off a bunch of corners that the public doesn't know generally shows you where we are now with Breon Borders and rookie Elijah Molden, who's great, but he's not on the outside. And Janoris Jenkins, shell of what he was. I feel like we're getting the Malcolm Butler treatment here where Tennessee thought they were getting a veteran who could still play, and he just can't. I mean, Jenkins got destroyed on multiple man coverage routes, which really kind of forced Titans' hand to play soft stuff over the middle and two deep safeties. And if Mahomes is actually patient enough to take what Tennessee is going to give him, I think that's kind of like an Achilles heel of Mahomes. He looks for the home run so much. I don't think there's anything wrong with Mahomes. I know people are looking for something to be wrong with him. He's so good. And he's able to make so many of these throws that more oftentimes than not, like the volatility catches up with you and you get hit as you throw, or you get a tip pass, or you throw across your body and you turn the ball over a little bit. So this Titans defense has never been at full strength, and it won't be this year at all. I will say the pass rush, we're talking about the Bills and maybe the best offense in the league. Like the front four looked really good. Harold Landry, 6.5 sacks. Like there is a chance that there is pressure on Mahomes, and I think there'll be enough where Mahomes will make a mistake or two that might crack the door open for Tennessee to win the game. But for DFS purposes, I don't care if Mahomes throws 3 picks. I think he throws for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Titans could win this game if Mahomes makes mistakes, but we don't care about that. Mahomes, everybody's just bashing Mahomes, Keith, and his fantasy output has been fine. Like, it's been okay. We haven't had that 40-point game, but 36, 28, 24, 32, 21, 27, high floor, extremely high ceiling this week. And there were points last season where we're used to all three of these skill guys being 9K. So for me, if I'm gung-ho on the Chiefs and I don't care about the ownership as much, if that's like what your thought process is, I'm just double stacking Tyreek and Kelsey, and I'm being done with it because Kelsey's under 8K. And I think we need to see where Zach Ertz is going to come in, which I think is going to help Kelsey's ownership a little bit, although I do think it's going to be high. But if Zach Ertz wasn't on this slate at that price tag, I'm guessing we'd have to be worried about Kelsey's ownership even more.
Yeah, I mean, like you look at the elite wide receivers, and they're in the mid 8 to high 8K range. Like that's where Kelsey should be. He's underpriced, and he fills a tight end spot. So, Kelsey's ownership is probably going to get away from us a little bit. I think Tyreek's will as well. Just an awesome spot for these guys. I'm going to, at least. I mean, you can argue game theory and all of that you might want to end up underweight on these guys, but it's just such a great spot for them. It's hard to see a situation where both of these guys fail. Obviously, one of them could go absolutely nuclear and the other one could fail. But both of them failing in this spot is really tough to get to foresee.
It is really tough. It's really tough. I agree. Both of those guys are banged up too. I guess it's a little scary to double stack because, one wrong hit and they're spending some time in the locker room or their sideline. We saw that Chiefs game last week. I mean, Kelsey holding his arm. Tyreek was in the locker room for most of the third quarter. So there is risk there for sure in playing some of these guys. But and maybe that's how one of them gets there and one of them doesn't, right? If one of them's off the field, where Mahomes is going to look to first. So there is risk in this game on both sides. You have A.J. Brown, who's been dealing with injuries the whole season too. It's like the only durable guy in this game, and I'm knocking on wood, is the workhorse Derrick Henry, who, God forbid. I mean, the guy just looks like a machine, but there's some risk, with some guys in this game as well. But let's talk about a couple other game environments here. I'm glad we spent time on the most popular game for sure, and it warranted the discussion. So where are you looking at next year, Keith?
I mean, the thing that stood out the most to me is the prices on the Cincinnati wide receivers. Obviously, Baltimore and what they did to the Chargers last week is a little bit concerning. And Joe Mixon's workload, and they're not really wanting to unleash Joe Burrow is kind of why you're seeing the dip in these prices, or just that they're not getting priced up to where they should be. But the talent in this wide receiver group is, among the best in the league. Like Chase has shown it, and for some reason is not getting a price bump. T. Higgins, last year we saw a massive red zone role. Coming back from injury last week, he was pretty chalky and didn't end up getting there, but now he's under 5K. And I think that the role for these Bengals receivers, even if Baltimore is still a pretty good defense, despite the injuries, I think Cincinnati is trailing in this game. And I think Cincinnati's wide receivers are a spot I'm definitely going to be looking to.
I'm going to pivot to another game that we briefly talked about before the show, and it's Revenge Game City, and it's Matt Stafford and the Rams hosting the Lions. I am really curious to see some ownership projections this week because you have the two guys up top in Murray and Mahomes, who typically, of course, I'll have exposure to those guys on a given week, but I'm more or less, looking 5 or 6 guys down and hoping the range of outcomes for Mahomes and Murray isn't like 45 points, right? And hoping I just survive. And I've been looking for upside at other positions. I'm petrified this week with the matchups Murray and Mahomes are both in, like not having a ton of exposure to those upside, to those quarterbacks upside, if that's the direction I go. But then I look at Stafford. Not only are you getting a cupcake matchup, but the price tag, 7,100. You can make that work with Cooper Kupp's price tag that we talked about, kind of got jacked up there. So I am expecting Murray and Mahomes to garner a ton of ownership, but after that, I don't know. This is like my first look sitting down today with you today. Like, where does Stafford fall? 7,100, I think, is just probably really generous, and of course Lamar is right above him at 74. So I think DK actually did a pretty good job of pricing these quarterbacks, because you still have the matchup guys in Stafford and Lamar, and we know Lamar has as much upside as Kyler and Mahomes. And then you still have Aaron Rodgers against Washington hanging out right there too. So Stafford and these Rams, I don't know where they're gonna fall. If everyone's going to flock to that KC Titans game, you're spending a lot of salary to get those volume-oriented guys. So what are your thoughts about this Rams game? Is it going to be Darrell Henderson the move? Is that where the ownership's going to go?
I think the ownership will go to Henderson. That's great call. And I think that Stafford and the passing attack is going to slip through the despite being elite up to this point this season. Like Stafford is right next to Lamar. Like people are going to click Lamar over Stafford. People are absolutely going to want Mahomes exposure and Murray exposure. Rodgers with a decent matchup at Washington, who hasn't been the defense we thought they were going to be. So, I mean, that puts Stafford as what, the sixth option that we're talking about here. Like there just isn't much ownership left at that point. Tannehill is a guy we didn't talk about who is down there. Like people are going to play Tannehill against this bad Chiefs defense. Stafford's going to come in really low owned, and I love it as a tournament pivot.
Me too.
I mean, we talked about Kupp. Higbee hasn't quite performed to the level that we thought we were going to, but the price tag is still really nice on Higbee. I think he's a guy that you can target in this matchup. And then we've seen Robert Woods blow up once this year. Who's to say he can't do it again? So I love this Rams passing attack. I do agree. Henderson is going to get a lot of ownership with his price still there in the mid sixes, but I love the passing attack, despite they're getting priced up, but they're putting up numbers to where they can still pay that off no problem, especially in this matchup against Detroit.
Keith, I love a good game stack. I know you do too. We see team stacks getting it done. Obviously, it's one more outcome you're not controlling in your lineup, kind of like pairing an outcome together. But a couple of weeks ago, we saw Tampa Bay throttle Miami, and team stacks were fine there. Brady kept the pedal down, and obviously Antonio Brown, was optimal with Brady. And we saw Kupp do his thing, and Stafford was optimal in some tournament builds as well. They blew out the Giants, didn't even play some of the fourth quarter, some of the starters, and they were optimal in some tournaments as well. Like, I can see this being a case where the Rams throttle Detroit, you play a team stack, and I don't know what the odds are this week of Murray or Mahomes not having a ceiling game. But even if Murray and Mahomes go for 40, and what if Stafford goes for 30? Like, do you take it if you hit the rest of your lineup? So it might be one of those. Like, you might be biting off a little more than you want to chew. But I think there's an outcome where you can get away with a little team stack in Detroit. And if you're like narrative-y, then you kind of like that Stafford against Detroit a little bit even more. Right. I know. You want to talk about the Jared Goff revenge game, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, probably will be passing on that one against this brutal Rams defense.
I think you make a great point on Tannehill before you jump to the next thing. Like you man, like you might not even have to play AJ Brown to get leverage. Like I don't know. Of course you want to pair him with Tannehill. Like I wish Julio would just play. That would solve some problems here. But what I'm saying is Tannehill will run that read option when everybody in the stadium thinks Henry's getting the ball. He scored on the ground against Kansas City last year. Like, he uses his legs. There's a chance Derrick Henry has 150 yards and no touchdowns. I would not bet on that, but it's possible Tannehill scores twice with his legs. And then, wow, Henry at that price tag. And then you have Tannehill with 12 points right off rushing touchdowns right there. And he is like vastly overdue for a good game through the air. So I think Tannehill is a great call. I don't know what AJ Brown's going to come in at ownership wise. Like, the Chiefs just affect so many things on this slate, I feel like, because their price tag, they're not 9K, so no one's scared at all to play them. So, like, I like that Tannehill, AJ Brown. And you know what? You want to run it back with Tyreek? Fine. You want to run it back with Kelsey? That's fine, too. You don't want to run it back at all? Go for it. But, I mean, it's just so easy to play Tannehill and AJ Brown, too.
Yeah, I'm going to take it a step further and say you can play Tannehill with Derrick Henry, just because this is absolutely an elite game environment. Like, I don't generally use a running back in my games, like a quarterback running back in my game stacks from the same team. But I think this is a unique scenario where we could just see a massive amount of points. Like you said, Tannehill could run one in. If he ends up throwing one to Henry, obviously, then you're really cooking. But Henry and Tannehill can both see massive ceilings. Even if it's not a direct correlated touchdown to them, just because of this game environment and what I expect the Chiefs to give up in this game.
We almost indirectly talked about almost every game on this slate, like at least a piece of it, which is cool because usually we don't have the opportunity to do that. But we didn't even mention we did. We mentioned Jalen Hurts before, but there's Jalen. What's Jalen Hurts going to come in at? 4%, 6,900. He's been the best bad quarterback in DFS. He almost has the Ryan Fitzpatrick blueprint of Well, we don't know. We don't really want him on our real life team we root for, but in fantasy, yeah, fire him up at under 7K because he just produces. Jalen Hurt. I mean, are the Eagles sneaky just for a price thing? Like having some, I can't knock you for playing Jalen Hurts. You know, Devontae Smith's getting the air yards. Jalen Hurts just stinks. Zach Ertz is out of the equation. Is Goddard going to be back off the COVID list? Probably. I mean, you can play Jalen Hurts. I talked about Miles Sanders. These guys are cheap on this slate. I think that's interesting. I don't know if you have any input on any of that. I guess I probably just stated the obvious, but no one's going to have Jalen Hurts. But talk to me about that game and then like jump into, we talked about McKissick earlier, but if Aaron Rodgers in a potential smash spot too.
Definitely. Yeah. Philly, you're definitely going to get them at low ownership. I think Sanders, despite being really low priced, I mean, we haven't seen it on him. I don't think people are going to want to do that. Hurts's price is climbing. So I think he's coming in very low owned here as well, especially with some of the other quarterbacks in great spots that we've talked about. So Hurts is going to be another off the radar play. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It'd be Smith or Goddard that I wanted to pair him with. So, I mean, I like that as a very low owned deep field tournament play. Love that.
I know Oakland. I'm living in the past. The Raiders pass rush has been better, but like Hurts in a game where he threw for 115 yards, did it on the ground. Just looking at his game log, like he smashes against terrible defenses, and even at Carolina, we talked about that front seven, almost 24 fantasy points. That price won't kill you in tournaments. You probably won't take anything down if Murray or Mahomes go for a complete ceiling game, but like I think that's fine. So I think that's interesting. I wasn't going to end this podcast before story time without just us addressing that Cordell Patterson is 8K. On FanDuel, but I also think there are pieces in this game that are going to go way under owned because the total is 47.5, and B, Miami played across the pond last week, and Atlanta coming off a bye because they played across the pond 2 weeks ago, I believe. Or was that last week? I don't know. I'm losing my mind here. Either way,
Atlanta had a bye last week.
Okay, Atlanta did have the bye. So Kyle Pitts finally did his thing, and he's priced up. Kyle Pitts is going to be vastly underowned against a defense I don't particularly care about. And Tua came back, and I guess you can even we're going to get some Tua questions. You can punt Tua in this matchup. I mean, he looked like Tua. I think he's not great, but he did well DFS-wise. I don't know if he's a long-term answer in Miami, but he addressed Jalen Waddle, and he addressed Mike Gesicki, and that's all I care about. And if Devontae Parker doesn't play, like, I'm very much so interested in Parker, Waddle, and Kyle Pitts in this game. I guess Cordell Patterson on DK, but I'm not paying 8K for him on FanDuel. So I think there's some pieces in this game that are going to be way overlooked and underowned.
Yeah, this could be a sneaky, like, high-scoring game, right? I don't think either one of the defenses is particularly great. And you just talked about a bunch of talent on both offenses. So, I like this as a potentially very low-owned game stack. People are going to forget what Kyle Pitts did because it was 2 weeks ago now.
Yep.
His price tag is up there almost 6K. I think he goes off the radar with the spot that Kelsey is in. We talked about Zach Ertz's price. Like, those two are going to garner a ton of the ownership. The guy on the other side, Gesicki, should get some ownership. I think Pitts is going to be underutilized here and has a massive ceiling. I don't mind Ridley either. Mid sixes on his price.
He's back.
That London game, we saw him start to get targeted down the field a little bit more. Like, through the first couple of weeks, he was just running these short, like, dump off type routes. His ADOT through like 4 weeks was, I want to say, like 6. But I think that climbed to 12. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it was up there in the London game. So very encouraged by that development and what we saw out of the Falcons. And it was 2 weeks ago now. Nobody remembers that. But yeah, that great point. Going to look into these Falcons a little bit more. Miami, Waddle is fairly priced in the mid 5s if Parker misses, and Gesicki at 4.7, interested in him as well. So yeah, don't mind this as a game stack as well. I think you get them all very low owned.
One more question for you before story time, and then we'll get out of here. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. Devontae Adams, where is he going to fall ownership wise? You have Tyreek in that game. You have Cooper Kupp against Detroit. Like, what? Like, I don't think a ton of people are going to play Aaron Rodgers this week. And it's a fantastic matchup at home against the football team whose defense has been terrible. We talked about the two guys up top at quarterback. Lamar is too cheap. Matt Stafford is probably too cheap. Some people will play Tannehill for some leverage. Jalen Hurts under 7K. Like where does Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers fall? That's the question for me, Keith. What do you think? I know we're early in this week here.
Yeah, I think Rodgers is way off the board. Adams is going to get owned, I think. I mean, you just look at, like, he has elite of elite target share. People might be upset that he burned him against the Bears. Like, he was fairly chalky last week in a tough matchup with the Bears. And I mean, he just missed a touchdown by like a couple inches. He stepped out as he was running down the sideline. So, I mean, I'm going right back to Adams. I love this matchup for him. The volume is as elite as it gets. I mean, 2 weeks ago, he had 16 targets, 11 targets, 18 targets. Like, we see these spike weeks where Rodgers just locks onto him. And I mean, it seems like you can just see like 3 or 4 targets in a row all the way down the field goes Devontae Adams and ends up in the end zone. I'm not fading that against this Washington team. So despite being priced up as the highest wide receiver on the slate, I want plenty of Adams this week. I know that.
I like it. All right, story time. On this show, we like to talk about something crazy that happens in our life or something wacky. I think on the first show I talked about my girlfriend's kid thought he crapped his pants at the first Pee Wee football practice, and that was my first like stepdad crisis mode. Don't know what to do. But in this case, I had an interesting parlay ticket, and of course, I am a Titans fan, and like an idiot, I made this ticket last week while I was laying in bed, and ended it with the Titans money line, which is a big no-no. And I had all these sharps in my Twitter mention telling me to cash out at 2:00 and telling me, wow, the Titans are going to get blown out. Why did you end your parlay with an underdog money line? Like, we're just in this day and age where someone can't be happy for each other. And yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm a homer, and I was on melatonin on Wednesday night laying in bed, and I just clicked the Titans because the odds of my ticket went right up. I'm like, there's some lunch money. So my tweet went pretty viral. I'm not even that popular of a guy, but I had like 80,000 Twitter impressions, Keith. It kind of gave me anxiety a little bit. But so it was a 12-team parlay, and no, the Titans money line was my last leg on it. And no, I did not cash out. And it started with Tampa Bay on Thursday night. I took alt spread, Bucks minus 3.5. Had a couple roller coasters in the 12-game ticket. You can see it on my Twitter. Had the Cowboys money line, the Steelers money line, both closer than I wanted to. I had 2 coin flips at the 4:00 game. I had the Cardinals +3 and the Raiders +3.5. I just thought they were better on paper, honestly, and I took the points. And I didn't expect those to be the breeze through games. But so I just put lunch money on this thing, guys. I wish I had a few drinks and tossed more on it. Trust me. And I would have hedged better, but I played it like a fish because it was a couple bucks. And so basically I let this ticket ride the whole game. And the odds are plus 57,000. So just to put that into retro,
just 570 to 1.
Nothing. Yeah, that's fine. So $10 would have won you just south of $6,000. $100 would have had you a down payment, more than a down payment on a nice house in this market. So my lunch money turned into I could go to steakhouse money, but we're going Applebee's tonight, man. But so basically I rode this whole thing out in one of the craziest games, Keith. And I want to know what your input was, because in hindsight, I'm saying, wow, Luuch, you're a wimp. Like, why would you do that? So I rode this thing out the entire game, and the Bills had 4th and 1 at the 1.5-yard line, couple timeouts. Could have got the first, like, what are the odds to get the first down? I saw Next Gen Stat said it was at least 75%. I think that's soft with Josh Allen and company. So they could have got the first down and then had 3 more downs to punch it in. I had Titans money line, by the way, 20 seconds left in the game. So they call a timeout. And of course, I'm on my phone, and FanDuel gave me a generous cash out option. The Bills punch it in, the Titans lose. I don't have any money. And of course, a couple of bucks, and I I sold myself short of a few G's at this point, which, I play a lot of volume in NBA and stuff. And of course I would have liked to have more money, but I cashed out during the timeout. And I ended up, I guess in tournament terms, 160xing my $10, which is fine. Like, I feel great about it. The Titans got a sick win, but the odds of Josh Allen slipping and running right into Jeff Simmons and not converting, like I didn't see it as a rational outcome. So I cashed out because I thought I made the right call. And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, just take the money because like you're not going to have anything in about 10 seconds, right? And yeah, it's a couple bucks. Why not let it ride? Easy to say in hindsight, but I'm like, well, yeah, I'll take the $1,600. Fine with me. I mean,
man, yeah, just brutal. Yeah, tough decision. I can't even imagine what you're going through as Buffalo is pushing it deep into Titans territory there at the end of that game. Obviously, in hindsight, sucks that you hit the cash out button, but I mean, I would have done the same thing. Like Josh Allen, 4th and inches inside the 5-yard line. I mean, you figure that, 75%, I think was the number you put on it. I agree. Like Josh Allen gets that more than 3 out of 4 times.
I'm an unbiased Titans fan. Like, I'm ecstatic they got the win. Everything we said on this show, the defense is in shambles. The offense is elite. The pass rush is okay. But that there was no doubt in my mind that ball's going in, and I made a spur of the moment decision. And I stream on Hulu, and I'm like probably like 50 seconds behind. So as soon as they called that timeout on my team, I knew I had 10 seconds to make a decision. Like I made an extreme spur. Like I was like, man, why couldn't I have been in the bathroom, like, dropping a deuce or like going to the fridge to get a Bud Light or like something other than having the phone. Doing the right thing, in my opinion, did not work out.
No, I think it was the right thing. Like you figure Allen gets the first down. As soon as Allen gets the first down, it's 1st and goal from the 3-yard line. Your cash out option goes away, basically. Like if it's 1st and goal, you're not going to have a cash out option until potentially 2 plays later, and by then you might have already lost the ticket. Like,
yep.
So even if the Titans come up with a sack or something, then you put the Bills in a field goal situation. They tie the game. You get overtime.
Forget it.
Like, do you really want, to be betting against Josh Allen in overtime with the Titans' banged up defense? Like,
forget it.
I think with Allen having the ball inside the 5-yard line there, man, I can't blame you a bit for catching.
I wrote it out as long as I rationally.
Profit, you never go broke, right?
Yeah, it's all good. Take the profit, as they say in the stock world. And before the game, the buyout option was $1,100 off the $10 tickets, I believe, give or take. So, I actually, all the people that were calling for my head for not cashing out, I actually made a couple $100 more bucks. So,
there you go. See,
real mix of emotions when I saw Allen fall. I was pumped, but I'm like, are you serious? Like that was the most contrarian outcome, I guess you could say, probably at that point.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
Yeah, man, just an awesome story. I don't know if people realize how hard it is to hit 12 legs of any parlay, especially betting NFL sides and totals. Like, man, that's just kudos to you. That is a really, really hard thing to do.
I appreciate it. I actually have one of my best friends from home, Josh Mooney, shout out, hit 26 of 28 the last 2 weeks, and Denver burned him both weeks, Denver. Man. So I kind of put this in. I'm like, my boy's doing it. I'm gonna throw one in, and I put a little thought into it, but really I was like laying in bed, like, I don't know, who you like at this point, what lines don't look right or whatever. And I do a lot of props. I know you and I both do a lot of stuff on Scores and Odds, and you guys should check out Scores and Odds. All of our expert picks are on there, and our team's awesome. Like I started doing some write-ups in August, and I do a lot of props, and I know props are, the bread and butter for a lot of DFS players, but I think I'm like 18-6 so far. Got really lucky on the Julio over, but I'll take it yesterday with that off the helmet catch. But you're crushing it over there too, man. So kudos to you, and definitely check out our Scores and Odds stuff, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Had a great baseball season. Missed on a couple of football picks here to start, but we'll get back on track. Definitely a great product over there. Check that out for sure.
Yeah, the whole team. Grant crushed MLB. Meansy with his early picks. Everybody. It's just awesome stuff, and sports betting has exploded. And I'm gonna run back a parlay. Like I'm just gonna throw some more lunch money on something else. I just wanted it for the clout, as the kids say, right? Like I just wanted to hit the 12-teamer more than win the money at this point. And but at that point, if the ball's on the 5-yard line, maybe I let it right. The 4-yard, yeah, like if they weren't able to get the first down, even like maybe my 10-second like switch went off when I had to make that decision. And man, so hey man, profit's profit, I guess. But I'm not the coolest guy on social media, and that's okay though. Okay.
Awesome story, man.
Keith, where can the people find out the rest of your work this week? Like, what do you got going on for RotoGrinders?
Yeah, so I do tons of the content stuff. You can find me with the value rankings or tags and lineup HQ. Obviously, baseball season is wrapped up for the most part on that, but I'll be doing some of it for NBA, expert surveys and things like that. And then find me on a couple of shows. Obviously, we still have the NFL show every Sunday night for Sunday Night Football. Be on a couple of crunch times for basketball coming up here. So really excited to get into that. Fun time of year for sure.
Absolutely, man. Well, thanks a lot for joining me, and shout out to the Chief. Hopefully we get you back this week and take your Pedialyte and take your NyQuil and get ready for some more DFS. So we miss you, Chief, and we'll talk to you on the show soon. But Keith, anything else before we get out of here?
No, man. This was a blast. Love looking ahead to the week that we got coming up. Another exciting week of football. So yeah, fun doing it. Be happy to join you anytime.
Appreciate it, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your week. Everybody like and subscribe the RotoGrinders podcast feed and check out our premium content and our packages now that we are in full swing in the DFS world. So for Keith Eyster, I'm Justin Carlucci. Enjoy your week and good luck.